Welcome to our weekly roundup of the most interesting stories. If you're looking for some entertainment or just want to stay up to date on the latest happenings, you've come to the right place. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button to stay tuned for more. And if you have a favorite story, share it in the comments below. We cover a variety of topics from breaking news to bizarre stories, so there's always something for everyone. Lastly, if you want to recommend any particular video from our channel to others, feel free to leave the timestamp in the comments section. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one. Girls, did you ever have a guy that you wished you said yes to when he asked you out? What is the story? Story 1. Poopy mental health. Don't feel like I could have a healthy relationship because of it. Back in my teens, my self-esteem was so low, it was easier to believe otherwise really nice guys were trying to make fun of me rather than that they were actually interested. Some of them were guys I had crushes on for years. Yay. Relevant first kiss story. Really attractive and popular girl flirted with me in high school, and I always played it cool because I thought she was making fun of me. I didn't want to be a big baby and make a big deal, so I just went with it and tried to be uninterested or witty. We hang out and she kisses me. It was my first kiss, and I was super nervous anyway, and was still paranoid she was making fun of me and trying to make me uncomfortable and nervous so she could tell her friends, he's so noob with chicks. So she gently pulls away after a minute, and I laugh. I thought I would beat her to the punch, but instead she cried, and I felt really bad and had to try to convince myself I liked her and was glad she kissed me. No, it was a cold winter night, and we parked in some empty parking lot, and the windows all fogged up. We are 16, 4 years ago. It's late, don't know where else to go, but want to be together, so she cried for a minute and thought I was laughing at her. So I tell her I was nervous because first kiss. She doesn't believe me, so I lean over and hold her cheek and kiss her several times and tell her it's okay. She comes around and we make out in wonderful teenage awkwardness. Then she drives me home. We hung out after that day and had fun times. Looking back, it was a 500 days of summer situation of sorts. She had a relationship but liked me and wanted to have fun with me. I wanted anybody that wanted me, but especially her. So she wants a fun, carefree time, and I wanted a lot more. We split ways when she went to college, but it was friendly, I guess. Now I've gotten more attractive, r/fitness, and a little more confident, but I've never really dated anyone since then. I can rest now knowing I've delivered. Growing up is hard. Story 2. Wow, I can't believe how relevant this is to my situation. Throwaway just in case he or a friend recognizes this post. Don't want the surprise to be ruined, winky face. I had a really good friend in high school who, to put it lightly, was a man-horse. We were really close. He would tell me everything about his escapades with a variety of girls, some I knew and some who were very much older. Despite all these conversations, I started to fall for him. Underneath his reputation was someone kind and loving to all his friends. He was the type who would do anything for anyone. He was a great father figure to his younger siblings, and was essentially the man of the house. Junior year, he revealed that he was starting to like me. He asked if I would be his date to our friend's annual New Year's party. But I was an assuming, ignorant witch, and I brushed it off. I was hurt that he would try to get in my pants. I thought I meant more to him than just another girl to mess around with. I never told him how I felt about him. Instead, I cut off ties with him. I started to distance myself from him little by little with no explanation. He would try to talk to me, but I would try my hardest to avoid him altogether. I went away to college, and he stayed in our hometown. After too much time thinking, I realized what I did was immature. Recently, we have started talking again, and I apologized for being a huge witch. He told me he knew I'd come around again, but I'm happy to know he really does care for me still. He doesn't know it, but I'm going back home tonight for Christmas. I plan on surprising him. I'm going to ask him to be my date to the New Year's party our friend has every year. Edit. I took some of your advice and asked him earlier tonight if he had plans for New Year's. He already knew where the conversation was heading. Cocky mustard, and said yes. I'm so lucky things have fallen into place. Can't wait to see where things take us, and thanks everyone for your support. Yes, this is stuff guys dream about. Hey, this girl just called me and asked if I wanted to go to the New Year's Eve party. Should I respond with a dong pic? Time sensitive. Story 3. I did this event at the Queen Mary and could not stop staring at this guy. I just thought he was the most gorgeous thing on the planet. My event coordinator noticed and ended up bringing him over last night when they had a ball. We walked around the deck, and when I told him how I had slipped and almost fell, he swooped me into a dip and said, "Oh, like this?" He tried to teach me how to dance, which he was great at. Told me how he traveled and loved school and all the same things as me. It was the best and most romantic night of my life. I had to go back to my group, and he stopped me on the stairs to kiss me and said, "This is the last chance I'm going to have to do this. What do you want me to do?" I told him I needed him to keep walking because, at the time, I was in an on and off again relationship with a total scumbag. I think about him all the time and beat myself up a lot for passing on someone so great for someone who didn't care about me. If I could redo one thing in my life, it'd be that night. Darn it. I know I'm a complete dumbbutt. He was unreal in how wonderful he was. Yes, I fully admit to being that girl who picked the D-bag, but it was my first relationship, and lesson was definitely learned. After stewing on this and beating myself up, I think I'm going to try to find him. He has a pretty uncommon name. Luckily, last I heard, he had a girlfriend, but we'll see. Edit, contact has been made. I don't know what to do with myself now. I think I watched this with my mom on Lifetime or Hallmark. Story 4. I worked for several years with Harry. We had a lot of fun at work and also went out surfing, beach days, mutual friend stuff together too. Only gradually did I realize I was developing genuine feelings for him. I kept all this to myself, of course. He seemed way out of my league, and I didn't want to make our work relationship awkward. Once he asked me if I'd go shopping with him to find some shoes. We went to the mall, found some kicks, and then he asked me if I wanted lunch. I said, nah, I wanted to work out before work, so see you later. Didn't understand he was maybe asking me to lunch as a date until much later. Idiot. We continued to work together and hang as friends though, and we both dated other people. Eventually he left the job to travel and finish school, but still came by to hang out. One night we were all drinking and we went out back to share a smoke. We were pretty drunk, and I was sitting on this raised box thing, and he stood in front of me and placed his hands on my knees, looked into my eyes and said, "Tinfoil hat Pat, I love you. I've never been able to say this before. I love you. I've loved you a long time." And I said, okay, handed him the smoke and went back inside. I didn't know how to reply. I had inklings that he had feelings for me, but we never came out and said it. I had a boyfriend at the time and wouldn't cheat, so here I am. Harry, if you read this, I love you too. Worked for years with my possible soulmate. He confessed his love, and I choked like a fool. Even I got hurt just by reading this. Poor guy. Story 5. 2 guys come to mind. Guy 1 was so sweet, and I did like him, but he was going too fast for my liking, saying I love you too soon and stuff like that. He somehow lost heart in pursuing a relationship with me when I told him to slow down, as it was making me uncomfortable. We rekindled our thing a few years later, but it wasn't quite the same, and it didn't amount to anything serious. He's now in a long-distance relationship with a beautiful girl. From what I can see from the outside of their relationship, he's a very sweet and devoted boyfriend. I sometimes think I missed out. Guy 2 was someone I really liked, but he was always talking to and about other girls, so I didn't think he liked me that much. One day he asked if I'll go out with him, but it was set up to seem like a joke, so I said, no, that's ridiculous, because I didn't want to appear too eager and vulnerable. I found out later that he was serious, but he wanted to seem casual. This happened in high school, hence all these stupid games. He had moved on to other girls by the time I found out, and went into a relationship with this girl. She was his first girlfriend. When they broke up, it devastated him. Then sometime after, we got together. I was his rebound, so it was doomed from the start, as he wasn't over her. I thought that if I had said yes to him when he asked me the first time, I would have been his first, and he would have loved me that much. Story 6. One time I said no because I was too busy with my exams. I had my head buried in my books when he asked me. The timing was all wrong. I regret saying no. Dude, ball's in your court at that point. What's wrong with asking him out once you're not in finals anymore? If a girl tells me she's busy, but maybe sometime in the future, while giving no specific timeline, I assume that's code for I'm not interested. If it's not code, you have to be the one to broach the subject again. I'm not going to keep pestering you. I've learned my lesson. I've always interpreted it as such. I set up a date with one girl recently. I was going to pick her up. She gave me her address and stuff. Then the day before, she canceled on me, saying she was too busy. I asked to reschedule, and she told me she wouldn't be free for at least 2 more weeks. First off, nobody's too busy to put an hour aside to grab a drink in a 2-week window. Saying no to me won't hurt my feelings. I'm great, so you're the one who's making a mistake. It's the lying that hurts. But more importantly, you gave a total stranger your phone number and address with the intention of blowing him off. What if I'm a stalker, or a red rummer, or a red rummer stalker? You don't know me. That's just bad decision making. Picking a quarter off the ground once saved my life. What is your most lucky experience? Story 1. When I was a kid, one of my best friends was the older couple next door's granddaughter. Her parents were divorced, and her mom lived in another state, so she would come stay with her grandparents. Her dad was a deadbeat all summer, every summer. When she was in town, we were inseparable, and her grandparents would include me in a lot of the family activities and occasionally trips, like the zoo, the lake, whatever. And my parents were always fine with it. One year, when we were probably 8 or 9, they invited me to go camping with them for a weekend late in the summer. When I asked my parents, my dad said, "Hell no." I was really disappointed. He wouldn't give a reason why I wasn't allowed to go camping with my friend and her grandparents, other than, "I just don't want you to." I spent that weekend bummed out and playing by myself, wishing I were camping with my friend. 2 to 3 weeks after they got back from their camping trip, our neighbor, the grandfather, came down with some weird symptoms that resembled pneumonia. He was hospitalized, and they found a weird, extremely dangerous mold in one of his lungs. He had to have a lobe of one of his lungs removed and was sick for quite a while. They later determined that the source of the mold was his sleeping bag from the camping trip. I could have easily ended up with that sleeping bag on the trip, and probably would have suffered the same fate, or passed away since I was so young. The neighbor was an athletic, healthy 52-year-old man. After we learned of our neighbor's illness, my dad just looked at me and said, "That's why I didn't want you to go. I had a really bad feeling about it." He has weird premonitions and gut feelings like that frequently, but that was by far one of the luckiest. Oh, and the neighbor passed away 10 years after that from lung problems caused by his illness. R.I.P. Glenn, I'll always remember you as an extra grandpa. Story 2. I was being very stupid, yes, I know. Drunk with friends on a warehouse roof at night, and a race with a buddy of mine. It was a huge roof, like Walmart parking lot sized, and it's pitch black out. I win the race because he drops out and starts yelling about it. I think he's yelling because he's lost. All of a sudden, I go from top speed to 0 because I smashed into a steel wall somehow. I'm in too much pain to realize what's happened, so after a bit of yelling and tears, my forebrain kicks back in and I realize I'm on the floor. I had snagged a foot on a low pipe and had gone instantly 90 degrees into the ground. Nothing broken, but some bruised ribs and some bloody abrasions on my arms. I was more embarrassed than anything else. So I get up and sheepishly go back to my friends, one of whom is obviously the guy who lost the race. He's like, "Dude, look where you fell. Why didn't you stop?" I was yelling like crazy. And of course I'm like, yeah, I know. I didn't see that pipe, man. It's really dark out here. Who puts pipes on a roof anyways? He says, "No freaking poop, man. Look," and points at where I fell. The pipe was about 10 feet from the edge of the roof. If I hadn't tripped on it, I would have done a Carl Lewis right off into oblivion. 5 stories down into the parking lot, aka my grave. Felt the cold fingers of the Reaper that night, but serial Pharrell'd my butt out of there. Not today, motherfricker. Story 3. I have a couple. Once while driving home after camping, it was me, my buddy in the front, and who is now with my girlfriend, might have been at the time, I don't remember, napping in the back. I wasn't paying 100% attention to the road since we were playing the alphabet game. Suddenly, I see the cars in front of me stopped. At this point, I didn't have the time to stop, so I slam on my brakes and swerve to the left. I was in the left lane at the time, onto the shoulder, but lose control of the car and get into the median, which is a big field of grass, a fence, then more grass, then oncoming traffic. I get up to the fence and swerve in the opposite direction, still slowing down and still not having control, and go through 4 lanes of traffic, which somehow were all stopped, and there was a big gap in front of the cars for me to get through to the other shoulder. Swerve again and spin out in the middle lanes. Sat there in shock for a few seconds before turning around and going on the shoulder, waiting for a few minutes. Girl in back flew against the back of the front seats and hung on for her life. No damage done. Was crazy. A couple years later, while camping, we get hit by a microburst in the middle of the night and a massive tree branch falls on our tent. but on the opposite side where 4 of us were sleeping. We get out, and a couple minutes later, another falls on the side we were in. Not sure what would have happened if it was the other way around, but it was crazy. Story 4. Late to the party, and not me but my father, but I hear this story all the time. When my dad was younger, he lived in Tennessee. One winter he was driving along a back road in the mountains, and the road was frozen due to it raining. This was way back when cars probably didn't have the best of brakes or airbags. If anyone else has driven back roads on a mountain in Tennessee, there are some crazy turns, and back then guardrails apparently weren't everywhere. His car ends up slipping off of the road and sliding, rolling down the mountain, finally coming to a stop when it hits a tree. Somehow, without major injuries, this is only half of the luck, he manages to crawl out of the car 10 or so minutes later. He's greeted by a flashlight. Turns out there was a house just along the road he was driving on, and a man pointed the flashlight at him, and then at his car against the tree, and then down the rest of the mountain to a river that my dad's car would have slid into had the tree not stopped the car. The man says, "You know, I've been meaning to cut down that tree," as he shines the light from my dad to reveal several trees nearby that had just been cut down. My dad looks at him in disbelief and says, "Sir, you had best leave that darn tree alone." And then I assume the man helped my dad get in touch with someone to pick him up, and eventually they moved the car. I don't know the rest of the story after my dad's lines, to be honest. Story 5. I was riding my bike from campus to my house for one day during the summer a few years ago. I had one of those poopy Walmart fixies, so as I was getting to cruising speed, the chain popped off the gear, and I coasted to the sidewalk to fix it. I looked up, and right about where I would have been down the street, a semi heading down the main road collided with a car, stopped at the intersection, and smashed him into a car that was parked on the side of the road. If the chain wouldn't have broken, I would have been waiting for the light between the parked car and the car that got hit when it happened. A similar thing happened again a year later. I was driving to campus as I had moved further away when I noticed my tire was going flat, so I went to go fill it up at a gas station. While there, I lost one of my quarters that I was feeding into the air machine. When I took off to head out of the parking lot, I saw it sitting about 15 feet from where I was, filling up the tire. I stopped the car and got out to get the quarter. I was a broke college student, don't judge, and when I turned around, a car careened into a guy stopped at the intersection of the road I was about to pull into. If I hadn't stopped to pick up my quarter, I would have been at that intersection right in the final resting place of both the cars. Story 6. I also had a lucky life-saving kind of experience. I was getting a shot when I was about 13. I'm very needle-phobic, but this was my first time passing out. I left the clinic and was walking to the car with my sister and her boyfriend while my mom paid inside. Apparently I said, I don't feel so good, and started wavering. My sister and her boyfriend thought I was kidding, so when I started to fall backwards, they expected me to back up so that I was still supported. I did not. I fell straight down. My sister said that I was headed straight for the curb, but just inches before I reached it, my body jerked and I hit the concrete. It was so loud my mom heard it inside. Had I hit the curb instead of the concrete, the impact would have split my skull and likely caused some very serious damage. Same amount of pressure, smaller impact zone equals more damage. Instead, I just stopped breathing, turned blue, and started foaming at the mouth. A quick hospital visit and a long night being repeatedly woken up by family so I didn't sleep, concussions and all. I'm all better. All thanks to that random swerve, which probably prevented me from serious brain damage. Too long didn't read. Sometimes concussions are okay. Story 7. I don't know if anyone but myself would call this lucky. I once got stabbed in the eye with a screwdriver, which was purely accidental, by the way. I was letting this guy help me change out some wheels on a pushcart at a restaurant I used to work at. He was a little slow, and I felt bad because no one would let him do anything other than wash dishes and take out trash. So I asked him if he wanted to help me change out these wheels. He said yes, and we began taking the old ones off. I handed him the screwdriver and told him to hold it in place on the bolts while I cranked the wrench to pull the nuts off. I asked him if he was ready, and he said yes. My face was above both of his hands and mine as I cranked the wrench. He lost control of the screwdriver and flew right into my left eye. I turned just in time. It actually only scraped my eyeball and put a small cut on my eyelid. I'm missing 3 or 4 eyelashes on my upper eyelid in my left eye, right by my nose. Other than the occasional sharp pain in my eye, I have no ill effects from it. I didn't even go to the hospital. I didn't think the injury was that bad, and I didn't want him to get into trouble. I told them something ricocheted into my eye and caught my eyelid. Story 8. I used to work for an arcade. We were renovating the shop, so we had to truck all the machines to a storage location. Anyway, the trucks had one of those electrical lowering tailgates, and we also used those 1 meter squared sheets of metal about 3 millimeters thick to use as ramps to help the machines roll onto the tailgate from the road. As we were lowering the machine off the truck, we had 2 or 3 people holding the machine steady so they didn't fall off. As the tailgate was being lowered, someone had rested the metal plate against the truck vertically, but was right under the tailgate edge. I noticed the plate just as the tailgate touched it, so I quickly tried to pull it out of the way with one hand, as I was still holding the machine with the other, but it was already being squished against the road and was too jammed for one-handed swipe. I was just about to try with both hands as I yelled out to raise the gate and noticed it was starting to bend, but at the last second decided not to. Just then, it shot out and flung across the road like a giant razor blade being shot out of a cannon. I would have lost my hand had I not stopped 1 second before. From time to time, I count myself lucky and look at my hand, wondering how my life could have changed due to a second difference. Story 9. Not my life, but my house from catching fire. My friend's mom had just dropped me and 2 of my friends off at my house. She took off before we realized no one was there, and the door was locked. I didn't have a key on me and assumed my mom would be home any time, so I suggested going to a park nearby to hang out for a while. After about 10 to 15 minutes, one friend said he really needed to take a dump. I kept putting him off because there wasn't much I could do about getting in. Another 10 minutes go by, and he begged me to break in through the bathroom window, one of those high, small, skinny ones that plummet right into the shower. I hated doing it, but agreed to anyhow. After the struggle, I unlocked the door. He runs to the bathroom. That's when I walked into the kitchen. My mom accidentally left a pot of water boiling. The water was all boiled out and had turned the pot black. Literally seconds from catching fire, in my opinion. Mom didn't show up for another hour or so. Story 10. When I was a lot younger and a lot more stupid, me and my buddy were playing in his backyard with a bow and arrow. Now, granted, at this young age, bow and arrows are like the coolest thing ever. We literally played all day and into the night. We had just shot all the arrows, again, but hid one behind my back because I wanted to play a prank on my friend. We were standing under an awning, shooting out into a hay bale in his backyard, so granted the light from under the awning only illuminated 8 feet up. My friend went to collect the arrows, and as he went into the unprotected night, I screamed, "Hey David, heads up," and I proceeded to shoot the arrow into the air above him. He looked at me and said, "Are you freaking serious?" and started to sprint back under the awning. As he's running, the arrow comes down and quite literally goes through the space between his thumb and his index finger. Not the skin, but the gap. The fletchings from the arrow brushed his skin. He was quite ticked off at me. However, we were best friends, so we ended up laughing it off. Story 11. I caught the worst stomach flu for my daughter at Thanksgiving time last year. I was throwing up every 30 to 45 minutes for almost a day straight. My abdominal muscle aches ferociously because I was vomiting so violently. A day after it started, I was beginning to feel better and was starting to eat a little and rehydrate myself with a lot of water. Once I got enough fluid back into my system, I took a wee, and what came out did not look like urine. It was blood. The violent vomiting caused the then unknown tumor in my left kidney to start bleeding. Clear cell type renal carcinoma, Fuhrman grade 2, size of a tangerine. My left kidney was removed at the end of January, and the pathology report showed no spread outside of the kidney to lymph nodes, ureter, arteries, veins, etc. My urologist says he is 95% sure the tumor had not metastasized to somewhere else in my body. I'm going to have yearly x-rays for quite a while, and maybe a CAT scan or two, but I'm probably out of the woods. If I'd not caught the flu for my daughter, I might not have found the tumor for a couple more years, and by that time it might have been too late. What is a true fact so baffling it should be false? Story 1. The life of Frank Salak, the luckiest unlucky man in the world. January 1962, France was riding on a train through a freezing canyon when it fell into an icy river. All 17 other passengers died while he escaped with a broken arm and hypothermia. 1963, on his first plane trip, he was sucked out of the plane's door and landed in a haystack unscathed. 19 other people were killed in the crash. 1966, he was riding in a bus when it skidded off the road into yet another icy river. 4 passengers drowned while he only received some minor cuts and bruises. 1970, His car's engine burst into flames while he was driving, but he managed to escape before it exploded. 1973, in yet another driving incident, his car's engine was doused with hot oil from a broken fuel pump. This caused flames to shoot through the air vents, singeing off all of his hair. He was otherwise unharmed. 1995, he was hit by a bus, but only sustained minor injuries. 1996, to escape a head-on collision with a United Nations truck on a mountain curve, he swerved into a guardrail that broke on impact. To save himself, he jumped out of the car's open door and grabbed onto a tree branch as he watched his car plummet off the cliff. Suffice to say, this guy had a complicated relationship with the Grim Reaper. Story 2. There were more planes destroyed in World War II than there are currently intact planes on Earth today. I mean, everyone was making a poop ton of planes. A poop ton of poopy planes. Commercial airliners nowadays are pretty sick, and in terms of military planes, the dominant air force in the world is taking a quality over quantity approach, despite also having quite a few, but yeah. What I meant by poopy was vastly simpler designs that were more conducive to more quantitative production because of World War II, in a lot of facets, was a numbers game. Like, they did the same thing with tanks. It didn't make sense to pour too much money into any given piece of hardware because it was just going to be blown up, since the technology didn't exist to prevent that in any way. These days, they can do that with planes, at least because it's kind of hard to hit something that's literally going as fast as a bullet. I got a lot of responses about how World War II planes weren't actually poopy, and I agree, I was just using coarse language. Story 3. One day, Mao Zedong saw a sparrow eating grain. Thinking that the sparrows were hurting China's grain supply, he and the Communist Party launched the Four Pests campaign. The Chinese military and population killed every sparrow they could find. Embassies didn't allow the Chinese to kill sparrows on their property, so the Chinese banged pots and pans outside the embassies 24/7 until the sparrows died of exhaustion. Unfortunately for the Chinese, sparrows mainly eat insects, not grain. The locust population exploded, and 43 million people starved to death. This reminds me of that guy who killed elephants to stop the desertification of the savannah, only to have the desert spread faster. I just heard this TED Talk. He didn't poach elephants, but he did convince the governments to kill them. He now advocates for herds of animals moved randomly around the grasslands to increase their biomass and, in turn, reverse desertification. He says that the elephant thing is his biggest regret in life, and it still haunts him to this day. Story 4. If you're launching from Earth, the most difficult place to reach in the solar system is the Sun. The reason for this is that to fly directly into the Sun, you need to first launch from Earth and then remove all of your orbital velocity around the Sun. Anything less will just put you into a different orbit around the Sun rather than directly into it. The amount of power required for that to do it directly is basically impossible currently. As an alternative, you could, for relatively little power, fly all the way out to Pluto distance, slow down much less, and then fall back into the Sun. The trade-off being the travel time is now about 90 years. There are others in between paths that could get you there for different balances of energy and time, but all of them are tougher than getting basically anywhere else in the solar system with an equivalent balance. There's a mission currently traveling to study the Sun, the Parker Solar Probe. It won't be flying directly in, but plans to make the closest passes than any probe ever has. It's going to make 7 passes by Venus to shed speed so it can get closer and closer to the Sun. The full flight time is planned as just less than 7 years. As of this post, they are 1 week shy of a year in. Story 5. If you earned $1 every second, it would take 2,921 years to have more money than Bill Gates. It's okay. I think I'll survive earning $3,600 an hour. Since a lot of you are mentioning taxes and leap years, here's the math for you. A common year would net you $31,536,000, or $31,622,400 during a leap year. With these earnings, your U.S. federal income tax bracket would be 37%, so a common year would give you $19,867,680, and a leap year $19,922,112. Taking taxes and leap years into account, we can determine that it would take you 41,739.2 years to reach Bill Gates' current 2019 net worth of $103.8 billion. A fellow internet guy kindly said that tax brackets in the US don't work at a flat rate, so the math is more complicated than what I, non-American, initially thought. The difference, taking into account the actual tax bracket calculations, is negligible. As another person on the internet pointed out, it's approximately 1%. Yeah, 31.5 mil a year is fine. Story 6. There is no good metric for the number of languages on Earth. This is mostly because linguists cannot agree on what constitutes a new language and what constitutes a dialect of an existing language. The best current metric of how many languages exist is the number of translations of the Christian Bible. Fun little anecdote about the Bible translations into obscure languages. A missionary from our church works for a mission that translates the Bible into languages heretofore untranslated and adapts the books and chapters into an audiobook app. He was in a taxi in Kenya and asked the driver what his language was. The driver told him in English that he spoke Swahili. The missionary pressed him and asked if he spoke a local tribal language. The driver said he did and referenced an obscure language he was sure the missionary wouldn't know. The missionary pulled up the language on the app and started playing the audiobook from some passage in the Bible, whereupon the astonished driver proclaimed, "That's my home tribe's language, and that's my cousin's voice." Just a funny little story that your comment reminded me of. Story 7. There are more trees on Earth than stars in the Milky Way. Every time you shuffle a deck of cards, you've probably made an entirely unique order as compared to every other shuffle in history. I love cards. When I tell it to people, I usually go with, there are more unique possibilities for card order than there are atoms in the solar system. A lot more. Then when they call BS, I tell them to Google estimated atoms in the solar system, 10 to the power 57, and compare it to 52 factorials on their calculator, 8 to the power 67. Someone once wrote down a great visualization for how big that number is. Imagine you have a timer for 52 factorial seconds. Get to the equator, every billion years, take one step forward to the equator. Every time you get all around the equator, take one drop of water out of the Pacific Ocean. Continue this until the Pacific Ocean is empty, then put one piece of paper on the ground. Fill the Pacific Ocean back up and do the whole thing all over again. When the stack of paper reaches from the Earth to the Sun, the first 3 digits of the timer won't have changed yet. Story 8. If sound could travel through space, the roar of the sun would be deafening, even though it's 93 million miles away. Because space is a vacuum, sound cannot travel through a vacuum. Obviously, lots of other things in the universe would change, and yes, presumably other stars and planets would make noise too. We'd probably all die screaming as the Earth itself imploded from the pressure of traveling so fast through a universe that wasn't a vacuum. Yep, the sun is 290 decibels. If space could carry sound, it would still be 125 decibels by the time it got to Earth. It'd be like a jackhammer everywhere all the time. Of course, if that happened, we'd probably evolve to be deaf in that audio spectrum, so we wouldn't notice. Story 9. Giraffes eat bones. Of all the possible giraffe facts to go with, you don't go with the fact that giraffe liver and bone marrow might be a hallucinogen? No, the coolest giraffe fact is that their tongue nerve goes from their brain to their chest, and then goes back up their throat to their tongue. Just like all mammals, just in a giraffe that means it's going like 20 feet and causes actual tongue lag that they can choke and die from. Cool and proof of evolution. I've been informed I've made a mistake. It's the laryngeal nerve, or voice box. Also, this adaptation can be traced all the way back well beyond just mammals, but to when we were fish, when it would have been a straight shot from brain to larynx, and hasn't gotten kicked by that pesky modern invention, the neck. Story 10. A morbidly obese person can survive with absolute starvation without any sickness or feeling ill under close control. There have been studies since the 60s. There was a patient in 1973 who went under a 382-day starvation diet for therapeutic purposes under close control with only vitamin and mineral supplements and water intake without protein, carbohydrate, or fat intake. No food at all. Dropped from 207 kilograms to 88 kilograms and maintained it. After a follow-up checkup 5 years later, the patient was 96 kilograms, stabilized. Prolonged fasting had no ill effects. If anybody is curious about the article, the PubMed ID is PMC 2495396. Keep in mind for anyone tempted to imitate, multiple others attempted this after him and wound up unalive. Do not try this at home. What's the most ridiculous reason you've been dumped for? Story 1. A disagreement about whether a milkshake was ice cream. It was winter, 2 a.m., I'm driving her home. We're talking, having a good time, things are great. She says she wants some ice cream. Where in the heck am I going to get that in this season at this time of night? So I stop in a fast food place and order a milkshake, the closest I figured they had, and she gives me a dumb look. Our conversation goes something like this. Well, that's not ice cream. It's the closest I can get you right now. You don't want it? No, I want ice cream. That's not ice cream. All right, then no worries. I'll take you home. I'm not even sure why you tried to get a milkshake. Do you not understand what ice cream is? It has ice cream in it, just a little extra milk, too. No, it's not ice cream. Why would you do that? It's no big deal. Sorry it didn't work out. Let's change the subject. Oh my God, you always do this. Anytime you're wrong, you refuse to talk about it. The conversation escalated. She refused to drop it no matter how much I insisted it wasn't a big deal, and when I finally got to her dorm, she hopped out of the car, slammed my door, and blocked me on social media. Haven't spoken to her since. We had a similar fight about whether maroon was red earlier in the relationship, but somehow we managed to recover from that one. Story 2. Can I do the most ridiculous reason I've had to dump someone? Started dating this girl. She's like 29 with a master's degree, really sweet and cute, so I'm excited about the potential. On our third date, we were driving to a late night event at a science museum, and she asked what I was most excited about seeing, and I said, I've always enjoyed the dinosaur fossils, and she said, oh, and got real quiet. After 5 seconds of silence, I asked if she didn't like dinosaurs or something, and she said, it's not that, it's more than, well, I'm not sure how I feel about dinosaurs, which led me to ask, by feel, you mean you? And she said, well, I'm just not sure if they're real. Beat. I look over quizzically. She continues, like, they're not mentioned in the Bible, so I don't know if they existed. I tried to get through the night, and to be fair, there were some decent jokes. When we were walking into the natural sciences wing, there was a picture of Darwin on the wall, and she said, hey, look, there's your best friend. And later we were standing in front of a skeleton of a raccoon, and I said, so just to be clear, your position on raccoons is yes, no, maybe? She was a pretty nice girl, and we had fun on the first 2 dates, so I tried to tough it out, but the dinosaur thing just ate at me for days. Like a week later, I called her from the office, and this was our conversation. Me. Look, we gotta talk. I don't think it's gonna work out for me. 10 seconds of silence. Her. It's the dinosaur thing, isn't it? Me. Yeah, it's the dinosaur thing. Story 3. I was dating a guy whose parents didn't like me. It was a long-distance relationship, and so mostly chatted online, but also made occasional phone calls. So we were talking on the phone, and at one point I said, you shouldn't have to choose between me and your parents. The conversation continued, and we decided to break up. We stayed friends. Something like 10 years later, we were talking online when the subject of our breakup came up. Turns out he thought I had said, you should have to choose between me and your parents, and decided that he wasn't going to do that. I would never give someone that kind of ultimatum. That would be ridiculous. It blew my mind that a single misheard word caused us to break up, and we didn't realize it for 10 years. I was dating a girl in college. After a month or so, I told her that I loved hanging out. We were out somewhere, and she looked at me funny, but smiled, and we carried on with the date. Not long after, she suddenly has issues meeting up, and I eventually hear through a friend of hers she doesn't think it'll work out. I decided not to pursue the issue, even though I thought things were going great. Roll on 6 odd years later, bump into each other, long conversation later. It turns out she thought I had said I loved her, and she thought it was all too soon, and panicked. So, could have all been averted if we had a conversation about it, but never mind. Story 4. This happened when I was 21, and the girl was 22. She was Hispanic, and I'm white. We were in the phase before a relationship, so I guess we were seeing each other. Anyway, we got along great, and to this day, I still think she's just an amazing person with a heart of gold. We were out to eat one night at Applebee's, and the conversation of food came up. We discussed our favorite foods, what we didn't like, etc. She mentioned something about trying new things, specifically things like Rocky Mountain oysters, bull testicles, frog legs, etc. I'm a relatively picky eater, admittedly, so I told her I didn't think that I could try any of those things. The rest of the night went on just fine, and I didn't think anything of it. A couple nights later, when I was talking to her on the phone, she said she didn't think we should see each other anymore, because she believed that I'm prejudiced against other people's cultures because I won't try any of their traditional foods. I was kind of blown away, but she had already made up her mind, so I wasn't going to stop her. I still keep in touch with her from time to time, even though she now lives 3,000 miles away. Too long didn't read. Girl dumped me because I wouldn't eat bull testicles. Story 5. Finally grew a spine and started thinking about the big brain upstairs. Got into an argument over trying to initiate intimate time. was trying to do everything she told me to, got blown off, and showed my frustration. I said, "What do you want me to do? I'm trying to do everything we talked about, and you keep pushing me away even more now." She said, "You are a 25-year-old man. You should just know what I want, and how I want it, and when I want it." So I replied, "Let me get this straight. You want me to just know exactly what you want, and exactly when and how to go about it?" Reply, "Yes." I said, "Babe, that's called reading your mind, and no one in the world can read minds." I came home from work, at midnight, mind you, and was told, "Pack your stuff and move out. I'm impossible to deal with." I was told I should be able to read minds just because I was 25, and I said that's impossible, so I was dumped and thrown out. Story 6. After going out with this guy for 6 months, I asked him if we were dating, and he immediately ghosted me. This has always been so weird to me. My friend has been dating this woman for over a year now, and they still won't call each other girlfriend-boyfriend. But this man is 39 freaking years old. It doesn't stop with these guys. It's so weird. You have to sort of slide into a relationship. You can't just ask someone on an early date, "Do you want to try and see if we can have a relationship?" and then you're a couple until you break up. I met a woman from Thailand when I was 23, and she wouldn't even kiss me before I asked her to be my girlfriend. It seemed awkward at the time, but I actually like it a lot more. To me, it's idiotic that you mess around and share intimate details of your life, and then have to wait months and months to have the talk. Story 7. In high school, I'm missing my left index finger, and we're holding hands while walking through the halls between classes. She abruptly let go of my hand and said that it was just too weird, and the relationship wasn't going to work out. We'd been dating for like 4 hours at that point. Looking back, I'm pretty sure what she wanted to say was, "You're too boring for me," or "We're too different," but she ended up saying I was too serious. It did sting a bit, and had me reflect on how I behave around people. Am I too negative or reserved? Stuff like that. While we had different interests, those differences did give us a lot to talk about. I liked her relaxed perspective on things. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.